Welcome today. If you're dialing or calling in from outside the US, please click calling from another country in your GoToWebinar email notification to view the US, UK, and Australia dial-in numbers. Today, Mo and Scott will discuss real-world business development best practices, tips, and advice on effective BD that will help you guide your fee earners to deliver BD plans and strategies. We will also share with you how InterAction builds on your existing BD capabilities. With business development planning and pipeline management features, InterAction has new functionality that strengthens your position to win new business. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them via the questions pane located on your webinar control panel. During the last 15 minutes, they will answer your questions. Please note that we're recording today's events and all attendees will receive an email with a link to the recording and slides. Also, there's a brief survey at the end of our webinar today. We ask that you please take a moment to complete your feedback. It will help us in planning our future events. At this time, I'll turn over the webinar to Mo and Scott. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Happy holidays. It's amazing that we're already halfway through December. We're making it through this year, and hopefully much more positive and amazing 2021 is ahead of us. So I'm really excited for today's webinar. Mo, we've known each other for 8-9 years now. I've loved working with him, and this year when we were able to put this partnership together, it's something I was just beyond excited for. And just the Rainmakers aren't born, they're created. There's just so much just around that. You think of, and a lot of you know me, my analogies I come up with, but it's truly like running or anything that you do that you put your mind to. You never go to the extreme of, I'm going to run a marathon. It's, I got to start with getting a mile in or getting some running shoes, getting started, and then building up. And BD is the same way. It's about creating habits and making purpose around what you're doing every day. And Mo's going to share a lot of great things with us today with what he does. And then we'll talk a little bit later, just share some things of how we're pulling Mo's methodology into InterAction outside of just the webinar and some of the other things that we're doing outside of the software. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Mo and we'll get started.
Well, Scott, thank you so much. I'm really excited on so many levels to present this content to everybody today. We are beyond just elated about our global partnership that we're working with InterAction, and I'll just keep that off to the side for a little bit later. Scott, like he said, he's going to describe what we have been cooking up in the CRM kitchen for all of you, and we have, well, I won't go any deeper, but we've got some exciting things to share and some more details that we haven't shared broadly yet, but that's later today. The content I want to give you today is going to help you understand two things. There's a part of your job part, and there's a selfish part just for you. The two things we're going to give you today is to describe what Rainmakers do, so you can be in the mind of that person that you serve, that fee earner that either is a Rainmaker or wants to be, and it's going to put you in a position where you can help give them ideas to help them be more successful. But here's the selfish side, and I think this is interesting. No matter what your role in life, what we see as the people that are the high flyers, the people that have the really steep trajectory with their careers, they're people who use those same skills the Rainmaker does to bring in business. They use those same skills to determine the arc of their career. So a Rainmaker will be talking about the fee earner, the lawyer, the consultant, the person that brings in business that has to get yes, that has to deepen relationships, that has to manage the proactive nature of their life while they manage doing the work. Well, those same things you can use to get the opportunities that you want in life, to get others to say yes and be excited about the ideas you have, to get others to like you and win the relationship advantage, to be on top of hacking those habits so that you can be focused on those things that you can do today to help your future self, to help your year from now self, in a way get the things that you want out of life. They're really the same skills. So while I'll be talking today to really put you in the mind of the Rainmaker in your organization or the one that wants to be, you can use these same skills to achieve what you want in life. So I'm really excited about that because this topic today has a bit of a double win in that case. So let's get started. So the first thing is that we have a little bit of expertise in this area. My name's Mo Bunnell, and I started my career as a deep technical expert and actuary So if you can imagine about the geekiest thing on the planet, people who wanted to be accountants but didn't have the personality, that's me. So I became an actuary. And I went through a rainmaking journey myself, which started in a moment of complete panic and fear, because this is 20 some years ago, and my firm didn't have a methodology to teach rainmaking skills. And we had it lined up where the same month that I passed the last actuarial exam, there were 24 I had to take. 2/3 of the people fail every one, so like a third pass rate. Really, really hard part of my life to study and pass those 24 exams. But the month after I passed the last one, my firm moved me to a full business development role. So before that switch, I was rewarded on client satisfaction and billable time and things like that. After that switch, I was rewarded on how many dollars I brought into the consulting firm, about $1 billion consulting firm. So what was crazy about that is, in generic terms, I pretty much went from senior associate to senior partner or equity partner, effectively just skipping normal partner, income partner in generic terms. We didn't have those words, but it's essentially what it was. So out of complete fear, because that transition happened in one day, I thought I would get like a manual from my boss on how to do business development. And out of fear of failure, I started cobbling one together. I just didn't want to fail. And over time, I was able to cobble together a system that really worked well for me. Before I had a system, I was working 80 or 90 hours a week. I was getting modest, okay results. But frankly, if I'm honest with myself, I was exhausted. After I had a system that started to work, nothing like what we have today, but enough at the time, 20 years ago. After I had a system, I was working a reasonable number of hours. I was getting incredible results. At one point, almost 7% of our $1 billion revenue was going through the clients that I was leading with big, huge teams. And most importantly, I was thriving. I was loving it. That's what a system can do for folks. That's how you can help your fee earners, help them with the content we're going to give you today to have a system. But I remember one specific moment that was more important to me than any other, that it was sort of a light bulb moment. After having a lot of success with business development and really falling in love with it by creating futures for people that they didn't have before, I flew to Denver and to toast a really important client of mine, because she got promoted to a C-suite role. She was Chief Human Resource Officer, and she had moved up from head of compensation and benefits. And we went out there and we were toasting a glass of wine, and she teared up and she said, Mo, it's because of our work together as teams that I got this promotion. It's because of our work together that I got this. She had a special needs child, and she went on about how it was super important for her to get that promotion and what it meant to her. And I sort of skipped back to my hotel room that night, realizing that I hadn't fallen in love with business development and creating these positive futures for other people. I really had fallen in love with teaching other people business development. And in that moment, that night, I decided this is a thing that other people need to know. And it took me about 18 months to get up the guts to leave the consulting firm and this cush life I had. But I went off on my own. And this upcoming Saturday, it'll be 15 years since we started Bunnell Idea Group. And it turns out a lot of people need a system for business development. So since then, we've trained over 15,000 people all over the world, lots of lawyers and consulting firms. And I'll spend the rest of my life on stages like this, sharing that we can help people learn how to do business development in a way that is proactive, is authentic, and is efficient. And it's about treating other people the right way. All of that is in our book, The Snowball System, that you see here. But just know that we're giving you a chunk of this today so that you can help your fee earners and you can help yourself with the same skills. So let's get into it. The first thing that we want to cover is that business development is a learnable skill. If anyone tells you that business development is not learnable, that the words you'll hear are you're born with it or you're not, or I could never do what Sue does, or things like that, they are not thinking about it correctly. All the evidence, all the research shows that any skill that's complex is both learned and earned. My favorite researcher on this is Dr. K. Anders Ericsson. Unfortunately, he passed away in this spring, but he was the worldwide expert on expertise. The worldwide expert on expertise. That's a pretty cool gig, I think. And he grew that expertise over about 30 years. And he found that people that are great at something complex, they broke that complex skill down into small bite-sized chunks. They practice each little chunk to perfection, and then they roll it back up into the fluid playing field of everyday life. He coined that methodology, deliberate practice, and that's exactly what I'm going to teach you today. I'm going to teach you the 3 big things that a Rainmaker does to create the positive future for themselves and their clients that they need. Managing their opportunities, managing their relationships, and managing themselves even when they're really busy. These are learnable skills, and while just like a great sports player, not everybody can be as good as the #1 defender of the U.S. Women's National Team, Kelly O'Hara. Not everybody can be that great, but everybody can improve where they're at, and everybody can always be striving to get a little bit better. So our 3 big things are these: managing your opportunities, manage your relationships, manage yourself. We're going to start with how do you manage your opportunities. So the way that you create demand is not by doing something first off. So imagine a lawyer, a transactional attorney has got an introductory meeting with somebody that at a private equity company that could just deliver tons of work for them, could keep them busy and their teams busy for years. Well, what we don't want to do is start with us. We don't want to say, hey, here's the 28-page PowerPoint about how great my teams are. Look, 7 of us are Chambers rated, all kinds of other qualifications. When we start with us, because the other side has what behavioral scientists call the consequence history, a past experience with that type of interaction, because those PE people have seen a PowerPoint deck with mission and values and qualifications and a client logo page and 3 case studies at the end, because they've seen that same deck 10,000 times, they immediately turn off. Their consequence history is, oh, here it comes again. That creates boredom. What we want to do instead of that is we want to start with the other side, ask questions about the kind of acquisitions that they're thinking of making in the next couple of years, what their exits are desired, what the exits they would like to have, the liquidity events to sell those organizations in the fund, and what kind of legal work is going to be important to have them execute on that kind of thing really, really well, flawlessly through due diligence and integration and sale in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. Well, getting into that conversation with a blank piece of paper, some really well crafted questions, and then ending that's our introduction, and then ending that with the magical phrase, would it be helpful if we blank to create an easy and obvious next step for us to start interacting, even if the first thing is a bit unpaid. We're going to limit to the depth of what we would do in an unpaid way, but the whole point of the introduction meeting is to get a next step. So the idea is we want to start with them. I'm going to give you more science on that in a second. Ask some great questions to get them talking. Now we're going to layer our expertise and advice in that by starting to help them right away, as opposed to talking about helping them. We're going to start helping them. We call that a give to get meeting, typically in an hour or so on our dime. Typically that give to get meeting is going to lead to a small win, and the small win, probably the small win even being paid work, maybe the first matter we work on them, the first transaction, the small win will likely lead to a big win because they're going to see our big brains and our team's big brains in action. So the idea here is we want to avoid starting by talking about us, and the obvious step is doing something big together. That's really difficult. And instead, we want to make a really easy next step, a give to get meeting, usually an hour engagement that we might be able to schedule in a week or two, something soon, something easy to say yes to, that we're going to create demand by doing it that way. By the way, I promised that I'm going to show you how to do these things for your personal life too. So anytime that you want to expand your job, if you want to start doing more work, the fastest way to do it is, instead of just talking about the promotion you want or the big thing you want doing, but start doing little bite-sized pieces, a give to get, if you will, by expanding your role. And if you just start doing that job, pretty soon people start seeing you as doing that job, and you're creating demand for yourself too. So these things work for any aspect of life. Give to get criteria, 3 big things. We want to make it, back to the Rainmaker scenario, we want to make it so it's easy for the lawyer, the fee earner, it's valuable for the client or the prospective client, and it leads to a next step. If we can hit that nexus, we're in really, 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 really good shape. The one that, I'll call this out, the one aspect that lawyers typically leave out is the lead to next step part. So I want to be really crystal clear here. A lot of times they'll want to pack 4 hours of value in that 1 hour give to get meeting, that little review of their past contracts or thinking through their due diligence process from a legal perspective or something like that would be a give to get example in this scenario of calling on a PE company. Well, what lawyers usually do is they try to pack 4 hours in the 1 hour meeting. No, we want to pack 45 minutes of value in the 1 hour meeting. That's enough for them to fall in love with a lawyer. Here's the key. Then we're going to leave 15 minutes to talk about what's next, because that's what we want to get into a dialogue anyway. So we had value up front, call it 45 minutes, not trying to do too much in this meeting, not trying to pack 4 hours of value and going overtime. Instead, 45 minutes in an hour, leave 15 minutes to talk about next steps. That's where the paid engagement conversation will come into play. Maybe working on their next due diligence and what it would be like to work together on that. So how do people track this? Number one thing, we want to get this information out of our head and into interaction. Or with some lawyers, you may be serving them by keeping things in interaction, and they keep a handwritten list. That's okay to get started. We've got a tool called an opportunity list that if you need lawyers to just start getting the stuff out of their head, it's okay sometimes to take the baby step of them writing it down. This tool can help you a ton. You can get it for free at a website, bdhabits.com, and it gets them writing things down. You can be pulling it into their interaction. Do that for a few months, and hopefully, especially if that business edge or other aspects of interaction, hopefully you can get the lawyers actually into interaction themselves, if that's okay at your firm. But it's okay at first, at least, to have you helping them with the technology. So what are the things they need to do? This is a zoom of that prior slide, that little tool that you can get at BD Habits, the opportunity list. The first thing you want them to do is to write down their opportunities. We think of an opportunity as something quite broad, anything another human being needs to say yes to. So opportunities are not just commercial work that matters we could do, but they're also things like speaking at a conference, asking for a referral, asking for an important meeting with somebody's boss. Anything that others need to say yes to, that's an opportunity. So check out these steps. This is really important. Listen and learn. It's really powerful for the lawyer to start with the other side, asking questions to get them talking. The science here is by Dr. Diana Tamir. She found that when you hook up people to functional MRI machines, when we measure the blood oxygenation in their brains, the pleasure center fires up when people are talking about their own personal beliefs and feelings. That's really important. Their own personal beliefs and feelings. We're not talking about religion and politics, but rather, in our example of the private equity leader, getting them to talk about how's their due diligence process, where is it working, where is it not working, in their opinion, what needs to change in the coming years. So if we start to get them talking about their personal beliefs and opinions within the context of how we do work, their pleasure center is going to light up. And the research shows, Dr. Diana Tamir's research shows, that's the same area that lights up when we're eating great food, when we're on stimulants, when somebody's drinking Red Bull, that's the pleasure center firing up. And we want to give people that Red Bull-like experience. The second thing, create curiosity. The key there is now tucking how we might be able to solve the clients or prospective clients' problems by tucking up how we might be able to solve them and creating some curiosity about how we might be able to work with them, but done in a way that it's aligned with the priorities that we learned when we were listening and learn. So the key here is to get hired, they're going to have to talk about what they need, and we're going to have to talk about what we do. What most folks do, and they're not thinking about it right, is they start with them. But by doing that, they're sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall. You don't really know what's going to stick. Instead, we're going to flip it. We're going to listen and learn first, get the client talking about what they need, and now talk about how we could serve them, how we could help them. And this is the key with their priorities in their words. It's going to be much more meaningful scientifically to talk about what we do within the context of their priorities and their words. The only way we get there is if they talk first. Okay, great. So third question, or third step, if you will, once we've realized that we've learned their priorities and their words, and we know how we're going to help them, and we've created a little curiosity so they're leaning in, what might happen is they might say something like, hey, what would it look like to work together? Boom. That means that we're in step 3, building everything together. And the idea there is, the science is called the IKEA effect. And in short, it means that we buy into what we help create. So we want 4 key yeses as we build everything together with the client for them to buy in. We want to make sure we're aligned on the strategic intent of the project, sort of what's the point, what's the goal, if you will. Then once we've got that, if they need fancy or quick and dirty, we'll do. Now we can go to timing or process. So once we've got a yes on that, which they might tweak a little bit, we thought we could do the work in 4 weeks, but they've got a board meeting coming up. They'd really like to have it done in 3.5. Great, they've bought into the timeline now. Once we've got sort of the goal and the process, then the third step is the team. Do they want to meet our team? Are we going to lead the work? Getting an incremental yes on them buying into the team, including potentially us. And then the last one, the pricing, actually getting a yes on the money. We might give ballpark pricing up front, but we can't give specificity around the pricing until we get the goal right, the process right, who the heck's going to work on it. Now we can talk about whether it's fixed fee, an AFA, time and materials, billable hours, whatever. So, but covering that up front, really important to get a yes. We find when people build everything together and get those 4 yeses, gaining approval is easy. So the idea here is getting into a discussion with the lawyer around where they would say the client is in this process and guiding them to get that yes. And wherever the client says that they're on this stepwise process, they're the judge and jury. That's where we're at. Let's go on to the next idea. Once you've got those steps figured out, now you can help the lawyer figure out, what can I do to lead them to the next step? What proactively can I do? What's the next little incremental step we can ask for? How can we do that proactively? And the idea is, once you write these opportunities down, you know where you're at, and you know what your next step is, the lawyer can feel like they're in control. The wrap I'll do on that part of the presentation is those same skills you can use to ladder up your career, to help get more involved in that nonprofit you're working at, to help get that special project you'd like to gain approval for. Whoever needs to say yes to those things, if you start with them and their goals in life, and you tuck in underneath that some suggestions proactively about how you might be able to help them, you've done listen and learn and create curiosity, then you start building everything together, those 4 yeses. What's our goal? What's our process? Who's involved, and how much does it cost, if anything? Once you get incremental yeses on that, you're going to get a yes, because science shows at that point, people are really bought in. So a simple takeaway you can use yourself is create an opportunity list yourself for the things you want in life, figure out where you're at for the people who need to say yes to it, and work this for yourself, just like a lawyer might work it to bring in business. All right, let's move on to our second piece. We're right on time. So the next topic is, how do you manage your relationships? So if getting a yes to your opportunity is a little shorter term game, getting a yes or building the right relationships is your long-term game. The key that science shows around great, thriving, raving fan kind of mutually beneficial relationships are three big things. One is Dr. Jerry Berger out of Santa Clara University found that we spend more money with those they like, really important for the fee earner to learn. They can create a relationship advantage, and soft skills do turn into hard results. And what Dr. Berger and his teams found at Santa Clara is not only do people spend more money with who they like, but the number one correlation that Berger and his researchers found to likability is commonality. Do we have things in common? Every time Scott Winter and I talk, man, there is something about technology in that conversation. We have about 6 things we have in common, about 1 million. He does have more hair than me, but other than that, there's a lot of things in common. But man, we just get on a roll talking about the new iOS or the new Apple Watch or whatever. And we have so many different things in commonality that you just can't help but leave every conversation engaged and excited because of all the commonality. The takeaway here for your fee earners is it's up to them. If they want to speed up the relationship process, it's up to them to find that commonality with their clients and reinforce it. Second thing, Dr. Adam Grant at Penn, one of my favorite researchers of all time, he found that the best relationships are mutually beneficial. They're not one directional. They're not just I serve you. They're I serve you, the client, and the client helps me as well. We are actually, here's the takeaway, we're actually letting our best clients down when we don't ask for help. Let me say that again. We're actually letting our best clients down when we don't ask for help. Help can come in simple, easy forms for them. A reference, a referral, a review of the document before we send it to their boss. Advice on how we grow our practice. Almost anything works, but what Dr. Grant's science shows is it's almost like the act of helping is so powerful. It feels so good to people that as they help us, the bonds of the relationships are tightened and created in a more strong way. So the takeaway there is we don't just want to help, we want to ask for help. The last one, frequency, first studied in Germany in 1876. The scientific term is called the mere exposure effect, M-E-R-E, mere. And what it teaches us is that the number of times we see something, the more often we see it, strongly correlates to likability. The number of times we see someone strongly correlates to likability. Takeaway there is it is on us to add value, to figure out who we're focused on, and to be in front of them on a frequent or periodic basis, whatever the right rate is, the right cadence. But we certainly don't want to meet somebody at the conference, send one follow-up email, and then not be in touch for a year. That just doesn't work for likability. So let me go into a little bit more detail, but it's these things that are the scientific crux of the tool I'm about to share. So the idea here is that similar to an opportunity list, business development is probably the most important thing that's going to determine the arc of somebody's career, of a lawyer's career. So we do not want to manage the most important thing for the arc of our career in our head. What we want to do is we want to have a system for it. So we've got a simple worksheet. You can get this one for free at bdhabits.com. I mentioned that before. But the worksheet here we call protomoi list. Protomoi is a Greek word. It means first among equals. And just by guiding a lawyer through, hey, who are the top 5 or 10 people that you'd really like to stay in touch with? Who a year from today do you want to make darn sure that we have a great, solid relationship with them? Well, just writing down those names gives the lawyer tremendous power and feels like they're in control, because we can release them from the idea they have to keep in touch with every person in their 5,000 person Rolodex or interaction data roll or whatever. But we want to say, hey, we'll reactively keep in touch with everybody, but who are, say, the 10 people that matter the most that you want to make sure proactively you're going to be investing in their relationship? Just writing those down is incredibly powerful. And then you, in serving them, can put those into interaction, create a tag, create some kind of reminder, some automated report that shows people, hey, don't forget about these 10 people, say, on a monthly basis. If they can mirror or align a report like that or a nudge from you with time on their calendar on a monthly basis. So it's blocked off. That's their their first among equals investment time. Incredibly powerful habit to do. What we've got here is the 7 scientific steps that we've found in training over 15,000 people, that once people write down the list of names, getting laser focused on where they're at in this process will tell us what to do next. 1, target somebody you'd like to meet, haven't met yet. Acquaintances next, we've met, but we haven't talked about commercial work. Curious skeptic, 3rd, there we've met and talked about commercial work, but we haven't been hired yet. That's the next step, is getting hired, typically through a give to get from the prior model. The 4th thing, new client, we're hired, but the relationship's still fragile. We haven't delivered on dozens of matters where it's really tight and strong, when we're one of the most important resources. Solid working relationship happens when we've delivered tons of value over months or years, but we're not, at that point, we're not adding value outside the paid relationship. That is a great place to be, but it's where we see most fee earners stall out. The next 2 levels are the most important. We know we're at loyal client when from the client side, they have called, emailed, however they do it, they've asked for some kind of help from the lawyer in a way that's outside of the paid relationship. So the lawyer only gets that client to loyal client if they in some way, on their behalf, have reached out to the lawyer and asked for some kind of advice outside of what they normally do and get paid to do. Maybe they're having trouble with a subordinate. Maybe they want to reorg their department. Maybe they need an idea on technology that helps manage the matters that they oversee. If they call up the lawyer and say, I just want to pick your brain about something, I'd love to get your advice on something. Hey, can I ask you a question? When that happens, we're in a really good place. We're not as commoditized as we were before, and we could call that loyal client. We've got so many credits in the bank, in other words, we could withstand an error in our work or something like that. That's really important. The last step's the most important, and that's called raving fan. Again, we can look at their behaviors to determine if we're there yet. As soon as that client has sent somebody else to us because they love what they do. Hey, you got to meet Sue. She's really great. She's really saved us on a bunch of transactions with due diligence. You need to meet her. She's the person we use. That's a raving fan. Or maybe if it wasn't proactive, they served as a reference and it went really well. At the point where they're raving to others about how great the lawyer is, that's where we want to be. And then, as you might expect, proactivity is a part of the system. What can we do next to move that relationship forward? That column in the little worksheet is the most important. If you're using interaction with the lawyer and you're helping them, you always want to drive to a task, whether it's an opportunity or a relationship, and then you can put yourself in the role of the accountability partner to them to say, hey, would it be helpful if I followed up to see if you did the thing that we said you're going to do? What date would make sense? When do you think you can do it? You're effectively a consultant inside the organization to your fee earners. So getting into that dialogue about helping them decide what's next, because you get a broad view across so many different lawyers, most likely, and being into the accountability partner role, if you can do one or both of those things, it puts you in higher standing with them. They realize they need you, and that's a good place to be. One last thing on this, I'll go back to the core. This is one of those things, like the prior step, that you can do yourself. Who are your first among equals? Who's on your protomoy list? Who are the 10 people that are going to determine the arc of your career over the next 5 years? Writing those people's names down, sticking them on your wall, and thinking of them first, your first among equals. When you've got something interesting to say, when you've got an insight, just remembering, would it be meaningful to share with those people? That's the kind of thing that will deepen relationships with the right folks and turn you from reactive to proactive. So I'll say it again, those same skills that correlate to being an amazing rainmaker will correlate to your success in life too. Writing down your first among equals, especially this time of year when it's such a great time for reflection, This can be one of the most powerful things you can do to feel like you're in control, crazy in the middle, especially in the middle of a pandemic, and start to develop the relationships that you want to develop. So let's move on to our last big chunky piece of content. How in the world do you do all this in addition to all the other stuff you do? So here's what you do. We've got a 3-step process for this. Again, you can grab this at bdhabits.com along with a free series that teaches the kind of things I'm talking about today, but even more. The 3 steps are, once you've got your opportunities written down and you've got that right-hand column filled out about what your next step is. So whether you're helping the lawyer with that or you're doing it yourself, you're getting the ideas for creating a positive, proactive future for yourself, whichever role you're either your role or you're helping the lawyer. Once you've got those written down and you've got the next steps, check the box, you got step 1 done. The second one, same thing, but for your relationships. So let's say there's 10 people on your Protomoy list, figure out who those are, incredibly valuable. Figuring out where they're at and those 7 steps I walked you through, incredibly valuable. The most valuable piece though, what is the next proactive thing I can do to add value in their life and dial up likability, winning the relationship advantage through commonality, mutual benefit, or just being in front of them with something helpful. Back to the science we talked about. So there you've got a list of potential next steps. Once you've got that done, you check the second box. You're good. And by the way, once you get those set up, usually only takes about 20, 30 minutes at most. It doesn't take much time at all to keep them active. So this doesn't take very long to set up the system. Now let's go to the third piece. Really important. What you want to do is you want to block off time on a weekly basis. It takes about 15 minutes. And you want to say, this is my time where I'm going to scan my opportunities, I'm going to scan my relationships, and I'm going to just figure out 3 things I'm going to do next week. It might only take 10 minutes to do those 3 things, but what are my 3 most important things? We call those MITs. What are my 3 most important things I'm going to hold myself accountable for to helping my long-term self next week? Here's our criteria for a most important thing in MIT. It spells BIG. 1, you're going to pick the 3 things that have the biggest impact. That's your B. You're going to write them so that they are in your control. That's your I. And this is critical. You're going to only choose things that are growth oriented. G. Big impact, in your control, growth oriented. If someone picks 3 things a week that satisfy those 3 criteria, and they do them, and it might only take 10 minutes to do them, might take 10 hours depending on what they choose, but they can scale this up or down depending on if they're busy or not. Lots of time, pick big meaty ones. Not much time at all, getting ready for trial, don't have a smidge of time. Cool, pick 3 things that you can do in 10 minutes, 3 texts you can write to clients checking up on them. But you're gonna pick big impact, in your control, and growth oriented every single week. If somebody does those 3 things once a week, fitting them into the time that they've got based on how they're busy, that is so powerful to create momentum. 3 things a week is 150 or so things a year, 1,500 over a decade. Let's say a whole team does this, 3 things a week. Let's say it's a 10-person team, 1,500 things a year they're gonna get done that are big impact, in their control, and growth oriented. You almost can't help but succeed if you've got your opportunities written down, if you got your most important relationships picked out, and you've picked 3 things a week that's gonna move the needle based on the time that you've got in those 3 things, or those 2 perspectives. If you do that every single week, you will be successful. Personally, if your lawyers do that every single week, they will do things that make them successful, and they bring in the meaty business they want. And because they created the demand, it's less commoditized, it's the meaty things they love doing, and they can start to be in control for their career. That's what this process does. It takes about 15 minutes once a week. I block off half an hour just to be safe, just so if other people try to crowd in on that planning time, I got a little buffer there, so that's a little pro tip. This worksheet, again, it's at bdhabits.com if you want it. This is a neat little poster to stick on your wall until you have the process memorized. Last idea, we've got an incredible self-assessment that's really powerful for this time of year. To take an assessment, and this is designed specifically for your lawyers, to get an assessment for where they're at on their own business development sort of fluency or proficiency. And the scores for this are really powerful. This is, again, this is at bdhabits.com, but you could print this off, give it to your lawyers, have them go through it, and then have a meeting with them on how you can use your expertise and the power of interaction to help them get to the next level. What's interesting about this assessment is we give it to lawyers all the time. Typical scores that we get back out of 100 are between 30 and maybe 60 for some people. And what's really powerful about that is highly competitive lawyers are used to getting 90 and up as an A. And when they get like a 30 to 60 about how tight their business development system is, sort of in the self-assessment, then let's say their score is 42, you will have somebody because their eyes are open, they're willing to learn, and as they fill this out, they're realizing, man, I was comparing myself against the other people in my role. I thought I was pretty good, but because most people don't have a system, especially law and consulting, when you give them the actual results for how they stack up against people that do have a system. So instead of comparing themselves to folks who aren't doing much already, they're comparing themselves to what they really could do. Let's say their score is 42. They are open to get your help in ways that they never were before. So this self-assessment is incredibly powerful to not only be helpful to them, but also to raise your level of helpfulness to them so that you're in a position where they take this and then they want to talk to you about it and they get real excited about getting your help, and then you're able to leverage the platform that you've already got in interaction to help them help themselves. So the self-assessment is a great way to get started. Another neat thing about this is if you happen to support a whole team, like a geography or a practice team or something like that, have everybody do this together, do it on Zoom, have them type their final scores into chat and what they'd like to focus on next after that. And let me tell you, it is an energizing experience and people get real excited about devoting more time to business development when they do it. So doing this as a team over Zoom is incredibly bonding, and it gets the conversation started in a way that you can't do without an assessment. All right, so let's keep rolling. We're right on time. Scott, do you want to pop back on, and maybe we've got some questions from the group in chat, or we could get some questions, or maybe you have some that we could talk about to really talk about how to implement the idea of manage opportunities, manage relationships, and manage yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Mo, as always. And we talk all the time, and I have about a couple pages of notes that I even wrote down here. So first off, I hope that everyone sees the inspiration that comes from this type of conversation. And this is actually the foundation of where Mo and I started talking about a year ago with this idea to work jointly with this partnership between Interaction as a CRM and Mo's methodology and Bunnell Idea Group. So, you know, you have 40 minutes of great content there. And what the idea was, well, let's take this great content and let's chop it up a little bit into smaller 30-second, 20-second subsets that we can deliver to your users, to the lawyers, to BD, to whoever is looking to grow, deliver them at the right time and the right place, and bring this into interaction. So there's a lot of things that, you know, just the interaction that most of you have today, in addition to the new hybrid cloud and some of the business development offerings that have recently come out, where this all fits together. So first off, and if there's any questions, there's a couple here, but ask more questions if you have any, and I'll go read through those in a second. But like, I know a lot about Mo. We talk all the time. We talk about his ultimate frisbee and even tequila last week. I'm not a big fan, but there's one I like, and I'm going to follow up until Mo tries the one I've been recommending to him. But I didn't know that Saturday is his anniversary. So this is something that I can remember some of those things, but a date, I can remember the ballpark, but I'm not necessarily going to remember that every year. So hey, did the math, 12/19/2005, he started the business. CRM, put this in. It's no GDPR, no issues with that. It's not PII, neither is Ultimate Frisbee or the things that we can create commonality around, but that's something that I'm going to remind myself. And this is a great thing that takes a couple seconds, but now you have something that's going to create a stronger relationship over time, because that's important to him and it's important to me. The next area you look at is, again, the commonality pieces. How do you build these relationships? People spend more money. They like to work with people they like. And we hear this all over the industry, not just from Mo. So this is like a core concept of business of CRM. Get that information into the system that you can keep and going and looking back if you need to. Some people do remember these things. It clicks little buttons and it gets filed away in your brain, but not for everybody. So write it down. There's no harm in that. And if you're taking the time to do that, you're taking the time to go look it up before the meeting with Mo, that's authenticity. Like that is still important. The frequency, you look at, a lot of you have IQ. How often are we talking? How often are we engaged? These are just like little data points that, hey, it's been a while since I reached out to Mo. We should go, I should try to touch base with him. Now, getting into some of the advanced things like objectives in your business development, there is proxy ability in CRM. So getting lawyers to at least start writing it down and thinking about it is a step. They can give it to people that work with them, and then you can put it in the systems. You can write it down. You can make it real, something that can be shared between all of the firm, because there are going to be the points where other people at Lexis know Mo. Well, if I call Mo and I had no idea that other people are talking with him and we both have our objectives going on, you want to make sure that the left hand and the right hand is working together. And so just having something written on paper, it's a good step, but sharing it in a centralized system is going to help make you guys stronger. Now, with that, the 45 minutes to get an hour with somebody and give them a short give to get. You have practice group leads, sector leads. These could be objectives. What is the thing that I'm really good at that I can share? It doesn't cost me a lot, pretty quick, but it's going to offer a lot of value. Let me put that as an objective, and who are the people I could target with this? So for a lot of you that on this call that have been starting to look at the hybrid cloud, I have an objective in interaction that I use, and it is I want to create a raving fan for everybody that's taking this step into the hybrid cloud. And as you roll out, I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm going to be reaching out and making sure that your experience is a first-class experience. So you do become a raving fan with that. So it really comes down to writing things down. And the next piece is listen and learn goals. This kind of goes back to what core interaction does today, but also goes into the opportunities. But when you build something together, and Mo and I have been building this little plan together since last fall, but writing these things down, put in interaction. What did I hear from you? What were your goals? What were your objectives? And how can I help you meet those goals? So then the last thing I was going to mention, and I have a question for you, Mo, is this a calendar audit. So I'm doing a class at Kellogg School of Management, and actually on our orientation on Monday, they talked about your calendar audit. So when you look at lawyers are busy, and getting them to do things like this can sometimes be a challenge. So when you write down, what's important to you, this was the professor, teaching, writing, course development, advisory, speaking, and then non-strategic time. They broke out how many days, what percentage total of his month or week fits into these categories. And then you look at it at the end of the week or at the end of the month and you grade yourself. This gets into the BD things, and where can Mo's focus, the self-focus and following big, can support this on your opportunities. Now I have that time broken up. What am I going to do with this for each part of the week? So I guess, Mo, one question I had was, have you ever, when you talk about building it together, and most opportunity stages are typically discovery, qualify, build trust, whatever, they could be different across all industries and organizations. Have you ever worked with anybody that was on stages of like, what was each stage of building something together, and the exit criteria from each stage could have been like that? Yes. Did you get a yes here? Now you can go to the next stage and the next stage. Is that something that you've ever had a client kind of think of in that way, outside of the standard discovery, qualify, and so on?
Yeah, I would definitely. And Andrew has a really neat question around this in the question section that sort of like, how do you start the conversation with a potential client when you're responding to an RFP? So let me give it in general, and then I'll answer Andrew's question for the RFP specific scenario. That's a great question, Scott. And the things that we see really tell us if we're able to move to the next step. And remember, the four are we aligned on the goals? Are we aligned on the process? Are we aligned on the team? Are we aligned on how much this is going to cost and potentially some other terms that you need to negotiate? Those four things, while I skipped over it super fast in the first 45 minutes, they happen to align to a bunch of neuroscience around how our brain is wired. So people are going to light up when you're talking about how they prefer to think. If they love big ideas, they're going to be a little more lit up around, do we have the goals right? If they're really process and they love thinking about details, they're going to light up a little bit more around the details and the process and the plan and who does what by when and things like that. So the stage gate, if you will, to your question, Scott, for each one would be us playing it back in general and be able to say, hey, did I get that right? Hey, let me play that back and make sure I've got that right. It sounds like on this one, we don't need super fancy, but it also sounds like a verbal conversation about our review of the contract would be okay on this one with your lawyer, as opposed to us writing up a 20-page brief. Did I get that right? So the person goes, yeah, that would be right, but I would appreciate if you'd write this and this and that down. You're like, oh yeah, no problem. Does an email work okay? Yeah, it does. Okay, good. So there we're aligning where it's not full-fledged like super fancy. It's not quick and dirty. It's somewhere in between, and we're getting sort of specific around where we want. So playing it back, you win if they say yes. You win if they change it. So that's good. Then we might move to the timeline and say, okay, wow, it sounds like that board meeting you mentioned is coming up in 3 weeks. It usually takes about 4 weeks to do this, but would it be helpful if we have this whole thing done and the conversation with your lawyer on your side before the board meeting? Is that, I heard that was right. Is that right? Yeah. But I'll tell you, we usually send the briefs out to the board about 3 days in advance these days. So it really needs to be 3 days before that. Okay, good. I got that. Okay, yeah, we can make that happen. It's going to be tight. We might have some nights and weekends on this, but I think we can do it. And then you'd move so on through the chain. So it's in that playing back, that in the tweaking. You're winning when they say yes, and you're winning when they tweak, if that makes sense. Scott, any thoughts on that before we jump into the how do you do that in a formal RFP process, which is a super interesting question from Andrew? What's your take?
No, it makes total sense. And actually, my mind is kind of set on the RFP stuff because I look at one thing that we all hate in life, and it's probably RFPs. So I can't wait to hear what you answer for Andrew, and then I'm gonna have a follow-up question on RFPs once you do that.
Oh, cool. Okay. So Andrew, I'm talking to not just you, but everybody, because this whole manage the RFP process, I know everybody's feeling the pain. I think we all need to like move to happy hour just to bring up the topic. But what we see in general is the science of the IKEA effect. That's that science that I told you about. Michael Norton at Harvard, other people at Duke, like really an all-star team did this research. And it's not that old, it's in the last decade or so, but it found clearly that human beings buy into what we help create. We buy into what we help create. I could talk about a bunch of the studies. I'll skip over those. But if you Google the IKEA effect, you'll find a whole Wikipedia page. The research on this is actually pretty digestible. Some studies are like, it is a bear to read them because of all the statistics and all that stuff. This one, you can find some no charge versions of the research that are already Harvard Business Review articles, for example. They're actually quite digestible. So dig into this and share it with your lawyers, but it's called the IKEA effect. So back to the formality of an RFP. There are certain restrictions and sort of guidelines in RFPs about you can contact this person, you can't contact that person, and it's different RFP by RFP. Some are ridiculously formal and some are sort of general guidelines. What you're trying to do is drive up as much conversation, as much of buy into what we help create as you can within the guidelines of the RFP process. So I'll give you 2 examples. If they have a ridiculously formal process, like you're kicked out if you do anything that's not mentioned in here, that's cool. People usually have a Q&A session that's live. Even though everybody gets the results of every question, you want to drive engagement in those because most people get scared and they don't talk much. So if there's 10 firms bidding on something, if you're one of the 3 that actually ask questions, that registers on the other side as they answer those back, even if it's in a formal, Zoom meeting or something. That's registering that this firm gets me. They're asking good questions. You have a back and forth dialogue, even if it's in front of everybody else. You're showing you're trying to listen and learn. you're showing you're trying to tighten the screws on your response. And I can guarantee that other organizations won't listen to the depth that you're listening to your own questions. So even a very formal, strict process, you want to dial up the IKEA effect as much as you can. That's example one. Example two, a lot of times RFPs are a bit more informal in the sense that you might still be able to call up the decision maker, or you could at least call up somebody in procurement and ask questions if it was reasonably formal. Well, those are opportunities, clarifying questions. Hey, we've got two options of how we might write this executive summary. Could I share both of those with you and see what you think? So we're making it ridiculously simple with the request. And you're always painting the dialogue, the request to ask for more engagement, you're always painting it in their best interest. So you might say something like, hey, procurement person, I'd love to share with you two options we're thinking about approaching this. We want to make sure when it lands on your side, it's exactly what you want. I would love to hop on a 10-minute phone call because that 10 minutes might save you 10 hours later because we're going to land this, we're going to write this in the way that you want. So being able to open the dialogue one-on-one in a little less formal discussion is even better because now you only get to hear the answer and you're basically dialing up the engagement a little bit, a real simple way, really easy for them to say yes to, and it'll start to build that IKEA effect really powerful. So anyway, I'll come up for there because I answered that way too long, Scott, because we only have 3 minutes. But the general idea is dial up the engagement as much as you can.
That's why I love working with you, because you answered my question. You know, like I do look at RFPs if it's a current client. Hopefully you get to a point, unless it's a panel and some rare circumstances, but you shouldn't hopefully get to RFP because you have the right engagement, you talk to the right people. If things are coming up, this should be covered before it gets to that point. But like the lesson for me, just because there are RFPs that you get from prospects and they're so cut and dry and they almost are asking you for cut and dry answers, and they're 60, 100 pages. So the thing on the Q&A, making the most of that and using that as your relationship builder is very interesting. So great lesson there. And I think that, again, this just solidifies more of the why what we're doing is so special. So Mo and I, from our understanding, we're the first two companies to do something like this, but to take these little bits of knowledge, put it in interaction at the right place, the right time, even in like a library where people can go find these things. Hey, I got an RFP, or Mo, you brought up like talking about rates, talking about money. Nobody likes it. And some of the salespeople that I know that are on this call, they know I hate talking about money, especially Brad. He knows it. Like, I'm terrible at that stuff. So if I can get the, hey, we'll speak with confidence. You want to go in it, you're worth every penny. I mean, these are little things that help all of us do better. And I think why this is just going to be such a powerful 2021 and so on in the future with this relationship, because we're just scratching the surface, buddy. And there is so much more we're going to be able to do, even looking at some of the reports and things that you're doing. How can we leverage Power BI and other tools to help make that process even easier for our clients? So like you said, we both like to talk, and we get into these. So this is why this was so much fun today, but we are almost right at the top of the hour. So we're going to give it back to Lauren, who's going to just do the final closing on a couple things to follow up with. And if anybody has any additional questions, definitely you can email me at scott.winter@LexisNexis. Mo, I'm thinking you would love to get questions as well, so, or I can forward them to Mo, but we'd love to get engaged with you all, and welcome the opportunity to help you in any way that we can.
Thanks, Scott. It's been a blast to be a part of this, and we do have a lot of commonality. We'll be on a call today at 4 o'clock. I'm sure we'll be sharing more commonality. So
absolutely,
we're so proud of our relationship with InterAction, and I cannot wait to add more value in all of your lives in the coming year through Scott and the entire team at LexisNexis.
Cool, and happy anniversary, buddy.
Hey, thanks.
All right, thanks, Mo and Scott, for your excellent presentation. To all of our attendees for taking time out of your busy day to join us. To learn more about relevant InterAction information, we encourage you to join the InterAction CRM LinkedIn group by typing InterAction CRM in the LinkedIn search bar. There's a brief survey at the end of the webinar today that we ask for you to please take a moment to complete. Your feedback will help us in planning our future webinars. Thank you all for your time today, and hope everyone has happy holidays. Thanks.
Thanks, happy holidays.
Everybody.